Chapter 6. The moment Marcus's eyes went dark, my daughters started screaming. Not the scared cries of children witnessing violence, but something far worse, agony ripping from their throats as their small bodies convulsed in perfect synchronization. The silver light that had blazed around them like protective armor flickered and dimmed, pulsing erratically like dying stars. Luna! I dropped Marcus's still form and lunged toward my daughters, but even as I reached for them, I could see what was happening. Their skin was taking on a grayish pallor, dark veins spreading across their faces like spiderwebs. The poison Marcus had described wasn't just weakening their connection to their power, it was turning their abilities against them. "Mommy, it hurts." Luna gasped, her violet eyes wide with terror and pain. "The light, it's burning us from inside." Stella was doubled over, silver flames erupting from her hands in uncontrolled bursts that left scorch marks on the cathedral floor. Can't make it stop," she sobbed, her small body shaking with the effort of containing power that was consuming her from within. Aurora had gone completely still, her eyes rolled back to show only white, but I could feel reality shifting around her in dangerous waves. Past and future were bleeding into the present again, but chaotically now, without purpose or control. The air around her shimmered with visions that made no sense, fragments of possibility torn from their proper place in time. "What's happening to them?" Damon demanded, dropping to his knees beside me. His hands hovered over the girls, desperate to help but afraid to touch them as their power fluctuated wildly. "The poison," I said through gritted teeth, my eyes finding Marcus's father where he stood paralyzed by Luna's binding spell. Marcus said he'd been diluting it for months, but they've still been building up toxins that turn their abilities against them. Now that they've used their full power. I couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice the truth that was becoming horrifically clear as I watched my daughter's life forces battling against the corruption in their systems. They were dying. The Trinity of the Silver Moon, the prophesied children who were supposed to unite the supernatural world, were dying because I'd trusted the wrong man with their lives. Elder Marcus tried to speak, but Luna's binding held firm. Only truth could pass his lips now, and the truth was that he'd orchestrated this moment down to the smallest detail. He'd used his son's love for us as a weapon, had counted on Marcus's devotion to make the poison's delivery seamless and undetectable. The rage that filled me made my earlier transformation look like a gentle mood swing. Power exploded outward from my core, not the controlled alpha authority I'd wielded in battle, but something primal and devastating. The ancient stones of the cathedral cracked under the pressure, and several of the remaining warriors stumbled backward in terror. I was going to kill him. I was going to tear Elder Marcus apart with my bare hands and scatter the pieces to the four winds. I was going to make him pay for every moment of pain my daughters had endured, for every nightmare they'd suffered while his poison worked its way through their systems. "Sarah, no." Damon's arms wrapped around me from behind, his strength barely sufficient to hold me back as I lunged toward the paralyzed elder. "We need him alive. I need him dead." I snarled, my hybrid form blazing with silver fire that made the air itself burn. "He poisoned them. He used Marcus's love against us. He's the only one who knows how to make the antidote," Damon said urgently, his grip tightening as I fought against his restraint. "Look at them, Sarah. Look at our daughters. We don't have time for revenge. We need answers." My daughter's screams cut through my fury like shards of glass, and I forced myself to focus on what mattered. Revenge could wait. Justice could wait. Right now, the only thing that mattered was saving Luna, Stella, and Aurora. I shifted back to human form, though power still crackled around me like barely contained lightning. "Release him from the binding," I ordered Luna, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. "Just enough so he can tell us how to fix this." Luna's pain-glazed eyes found mine, and she nodded weakly. The silver light around Elder Marcus flickered, and suddenly he could speak again, though I could see the binding was still in place, ensuring only truth would come from his lips. "There is no antidote," he said immediately, the words forced from him by Luna's compulsion. "The poison was designed to be irreversible once their power was fully activated." I wanted them to die, wanted the prophecy to die with them. The confession hit me like a physical blow. No antidote. No way to save them. I'd failed as a mother in the most fundamental way possible. I'd let someone I trusted poison my children, and now I was going to watch them die. Liar, Damon growled, his own power rising in response to the threat to our daughters. There has to be something. Some way to counteract what you've done. I'm bound to speak only truth, Elder Marcus replied, his voice hollow with defeat. The poison feeds on supernatural power, grows stronger the more they use their abilities. It was always meant to be a trap, let them reveal themselves fully, then watch as their own gifts consume them from within. Stella's sobs grew weaker, her silver flames guttering lower. Aurora's reality shifting had slowed to occasional ripples, and Luna's violet eyes were losing focus. I could feel their life forces fading, could sense the Trinity's bond with each other fraying as the poison worked its deadly magic. Then Seline stepped forward. She was still in her torn wedding dress, still beautiful despite everything that had happened, but there was something different in her expression. Not the calculated malice I'd grown accustomed to, but something that might have been regret. There might be a way, she said quietly. Every eye in the cathedral turned to her, including Elder Marcus's. His face went white with shock and something that looked like betrayal. Seline, no. We agreed. You agreed, she cut him off, her voice sharp with years of suppressed resentment. I was 19 years old when you convinced me to seduce Damon, to destroy his bond with Sarah. I was barely more than a child myself, and you made me believe I was saving the pack from destruction. She looked at my dying daughters, and I saw something crack in her perfect composure. But they're not destroyers. They're healers. Even when you sent warriors to kill them, they used their power to protect everyone else in this cathedral. They're exactly what the prophecy promised, unity, not conquest. The way, I said urgently, taking a step toward her despite every instinct screaming not to trust this woman who'd destroyed my life once before. You said there might be a way to save them. Celine's blue eyes met mine, and for the first time in 5 years, I saw her without her carefully constructed mask. She looked tired. Haunted. Like a woman who'd spent years living with choices that had slowly eaten away at her soul. The poison feeds on supernatural power, she said slowly, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent cathedral. But it can be drawn out if someone willingly takes it into themselves. Someone with enough alpha power to contain it, to burn it out of their system through sheer force of will. I'll do it, I said immediately. Whatever it takes. It has to be their father, Seline interrupted. The poison recognizes bloodline connections. Only Damon's alpha power can draw it from them completely. Damon stepped forward without hesitation. Then we do it. How? But Celine's expression had gone grim, and I felt my heart sink even before she spoke. The process would drain your alpha power permanently, Damon. You'd survive, but you'd be ordinary. Human-level strength, human lifespan, no connection to pack hierarchy or supernatural abilities. You'd save them, but you'd lose everything that makes you what you are. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Damon's alpha power wasn't just his strength, it was his identity, his purpose, the foundation of everything he'd built his life around. To give it up permanently would be like asking him to cut out his own heart. But he didn't hesitate. How do we start? He asked simply. Damon, no, Elder Thorne stepped forward, his ancient face creased with concern. You don't understand what you're agreeing to. Without your alpha power, you couldn't lead the pack, couldn't protect your territory, couldn't. I couldn't save my daughters the first time because I was too worried about my position, my reputation, my precious alpha status. Damon cut him off, his dark eyes blazing with determination. I won't make that mistake again. They matter more than any of it. He looked at me, and in his gaze I saw 5 years of regret, of desperate longing, of love that had never truly died despite everything that had happened between us. I failed them once, Sarah. I failed you. I won't fail them again. The mate bond between us flared so brightly it nearly brought me to my knees. This was the man I'd fallen in love with, not the alpha obsessed with status and tradition, but the one who would sacrifice everything for his family. The one who'd been buried under years of societal expectations and political maneuvering, but had never truly disappeared. The ritual requires both parents, Seline continued, her voice growing stronger as she embraced what might have been the first truly selfless decision of her adult life. Sarah's Luna Queen power and Damon's alpha strength, working together to draw the poison into him and burn it away. But what? I demanded. But it might kill him, she admitted. Taking that much corruption into his system, trying to burn it away without the supernatural strength to heal from it, there's a very real chance he won't survive the process. The cathedral fell silent except for my daughter's weakening cries. I looked at them, my 3 little girls who'd been the center of my world for 5 years, who'd never asked to be prophesied or poisoned or caught in the middle of supernatural politics. They were fading fast, their combined light growing dimmer with each passing moment. Then I looked at Damon, the man who'd broken my heart so completely I'd thought it would never heal, who was now offering to die to save the children he'd only just learned existed. Do it, I said quietly. Tell us what we need to do. Seline nodded, her blonde hair catching the cathedral's stained glass light as she moved toward the altar. We'll need to create a circle, use the sacred space to amplify the connection between you. The girls will need to be in the center, and you'll both need to open yourselves completely to the mate bond. My heart clenched. Opening completely to the mate bond meant dropping every wall I'd built over the past 5 years, letting Damon feel every moment of pain and loneliness and betrayal I'd endured. It meant trusting him with my heart again, even knowing he might not survive the next hour. But as Aurora's reality shifting finally stopped completely, as Stella's flames guttered to nothing, as Luna's violet eyes went completely glassy, I knew I'd risk anything to save them. Positions, I said, lifting Luna's limp form while Damon gathered Stella and Aurora. Whatever happens next, we face it together. For the first time in 5 years, the words felt like a promise rather than a threat. But as we arranged ourselves in the center of Seline's ritual circle, as I felt the mate bond preparing to blaze between us with potentially lethal intensity, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to discover just how much more we could lose.
Chapter 7. I watched Damon cradle Stella's dying form against his chest, his hands shaking as he felt her life force growing weaker by the moment. The man who'd commanded armies, who'd never shown weakness in public, was coming apart at the seams as he faced losing a daughter he'd only just discovered. I can't do this, he whispered, his voice breaking. How can I choose between saving them and being able to protect them afterward? If I lose my alpha power, how do I keep them safe from the next threat? How do I? You don't, I said quietly, adjusting Luna's limp weight in my arms. You trust that love is stronger than power. That being their father matters more than being their alpha. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, he'd chosen his throne over our bond, had let political concerns outweigh his heart. Now the universe was demanding he make the opposite choice, sacrifice everything he'd valued above our relationship to save the children born from it. Part of me, the part that had spent 5 years nursing heartbreak and betrayal, wanted him to suffer through this decision. Wanted him to feel the crushing weight of impossible choices, the way I'd felt every day since my banishment. But as I looked at Aurora's still face, at the gray pallor spreading across her cheeks, I realized revenge meant nothing if my daughters died. Time, I said urgently. How much time do we have left? Seline was still arranging the ritual circle, her movements precise despite the chaos around us. Minutes, she replied without looking up. Their life forces are failing fast. Once the Trinity bond breaks completely. She didn't need to finish. I could feel it myself. The connection between my daughters that had existed since before their birth was fraying. Threads of silver light snapping one by one as the poison consumed them from within. When that bond shattered completely, they would die. Do it, Damon said suddenly, his voice strong with resolution. I don't care about the throne. Don't care about status or power or anything except them. Tell me what I need to do. The relief that flooded through me was almost overwhelming. This was the man I'd fallen in love with. The one who'd been buried under years of political pressure and societal expectations. The one who would sacrifice anything for his family. Place them in the center of the circle, Seline instructed, her hands weaving patterns in the air that made the cathedral's stones hum with ancient power. The girls need to be touching, their trinity bond as strong as possible. Then you and Sarah stand at opposite points, north and south, Alpha and Luna, balancing forces. We moved quickly, laying my daughters in the center of the intricate pattern Seline had carved into the cathedral floor with silver light. Luna, Stella, and Aurora formed a perfect triangle, their small hands just barely touching, their combined glow so faint it was barely visible. As I took my position at the southern point of the circle, I felt something stirring deep in my chest. The Luna Queen power that had awakened during the battle was growing stronger, responding to the ancient magic Seline was channeling. But it felt different now, not just the authority to command werewolves, but something vast and encompassing that made my skin tingle with possibility. Open the mate bond, Seline commanded, her blue eyes blazing with concentration as she began to chant in the old tongue. Let it flow between you without barriers, without protection. The ritual needs your combined strength, your united will. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Opening the mate bond completely meant letting Damon feel everything. 5 years of pain and loneliness, the agony of giving birth alone, the fear and desperation of raising 3 supernatural children without any support. It meant being vulnerable in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be since the night he'd cast me out. But Luna's breathing was growing more labored, and Stella had gone completely still. There was no time for self-protection. I dropped every wall, every barrier, every carefully constructed defense I'd built around my heart. The mate bond blazed to life between us with an intensity that stole my breath, carrying 5 years of separation and pain and desperate longing. Through the connection, I felt Damon's shock as my emotions hit him full force. The devastating loneliness of those first months in exile. The terror of discovering I was carrying triplets with no pack support. No medical knowledge of supernatural multiple births. The agonizing fear every time one of the girls showed signs of their emerging power, knowing I had no idea how to guide or protect them. But underneath all the pain, he felt something else, the fierce, unwavering love I'd carried for him despite everything. The way I'd never stopped hoping he'd realize the truth, never stopped missing the mate bond we'd shared, never stopped loving the man he'd been before politics and tradition had corrupted his judgment. Sarah, he whispered, my name carrying 5 years of regret and desperate longing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it. I know, I replied, tears streaming down my face as I felt his matching emotions through the bond. His horror at what he'd done, his self-loathing for believing Celine's lies, his desperate desire to make amends for the unforgivable. We'll deal with it later. Right now, just help me save them. The ritual circle blazed brighter as our combined power fed into it. Silver light spiraling upward from the ancient stones. I could feel the magic beginning to work, could sense the poison in my daughter's systems responding to the pull of Damon's alpha strength. But then Elder Marcus stepped forward. Seline, stop this, he commanded, his voice carrying despite Luna's binding. The compulsion to speak only truth was still in place, but his fanaticism blazed stronger than any magical constraint. You're betraying everything we've worked for. The prophecy was right, Seline snapped, not breaking her concentration as the ritual intensified. But we were wrong about what it meant. These children aren't destroyers, they're healers. They're exactly what the supernatural world needs. They're abominations that will end pack hierarchy forever. Elder Marcus roared, lunging toward the circle. I won't let you. Celine's hand shot out, silver fire erupting from her palm to strike her father in the chest. The blow sent him flying backward, his body hitting the cathedral wall with a sickening crack. But instead of staying down, he began to laugh. You think you've won? He gasped, blood streaming from his mouth as he struggled to his feet. You think saving these monsters will change anything? I've been preparing for this moment for 30 years, daughter. Did you really think I'd come here without contingencies? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that looked like a modified detonator. My blood turned to ice as I realized what it was, not explosives but something far worse. Supernatural suppressant gas. he said, his thumb hovering over the trigger. Concentrated enough to kill every supernatural being in this cathedral within minutes. If I can't stop the Trinity, I'll make sure they die with everyone else. The threat hung in the air like a death sentence. He was willing to commit genocide, to murder an entire pack of innocent people, just to prevent the prophecy from being fulfilled. But Seline was already moving. No, she snarled, and something fundamental shifted in her expression. The regret and redemption I glimpsed moments before vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating that made my skin crawl. You've ruined enough lives with your fanaticism. Silver light exploded from her hands. Not the controlled ritual magic she'd been using, but raw power that made the cathedral shake. Elder Marcus screamed as her attack hit him, but instead of falling, he began to change. His body stretched and contorted, bones cracking and reforming as supernatural power flooded his system. But this wasn't a normal transformation. This was something wrong. Something twisted that violated every law of nature I'd ever known. What did you do? I demanded, horror flooding through me as Elder Marcus's form continued to shift and grow. I gave him exactly what he hated most, Seline replied, her voice carrying a madness that made my blood run cold. Supernatural power. More than any werewolf has ever possessed. He wanted to destroy us? Now he can experience firsthand what it feels like to be what he despises. The thing that had been Elder Marcus let out a roar that shattered several stained glass windows. It was massive now, at least 10 feet tall, with claws like swords and eyes that blazed with corrupted silver light. But worst of all, it was still partially human, aware and intelligent and filled with the same fanatical hatred that had driven the man, now amplified by supernatural strength beyond comprehension. Seline, you've doomed us all, Elder Thorn whispered, backing away from the monstrosity she'd created. That level of force transformation, it's unstable, unsustainable. It will tear itself apart, but not before. The creature lunged toward the ritual circle, toward my dying daughters, with speed that shouldn't have been possible for something so large. I threw myself forward, my own power blazing as I shifted into my hybrid form, but I knew I wouldn't be fast enough. Then something extraordinary happened. Power erupted from deep within my core. Not just Luna Queen authority, not just alpha strength, but something vast and primal that made the cathedral's ancient stones sing with recognition. Every supernatural being in the cathedral fell to their knees as wave after wave of otherworldly energy poured from me. I wasn't just the Luna Queen, I realized with crystalline clarity. I was the Supreme Alpha, the prophesied ruler not just of werewolves, but of all supernatural beings. The power that had been growing in me for 5 years was finally awakening fully, responding to the threat against my daughters and my pack. The corrupted creature that had been Elder Marcus slammed into my power like hitting a wall of solid force. It staggered backward, confusion and terror replacing the madness in its blazing eyes as it encountered something far stronger than itself. You want to destroy the supernatural world? I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral and beyond, reaching into the hearts of every werewolf, vampire, fae, and witch within a 100-mile radius. You want to prevent unity and peace? Then face the Supreme Alpha, and learn what real power looks like. The creature roared challenge, but I could see fear beneath its rage. It had been created to destroy the Trinity, but it had never been designed to face the full power of their mother. Behind me, the ritual circle blazed brighter as Damon poured his alpha strength into saving our daughters. I could feel the poison being drawn from their small bodies, could sense their life forces growing stronger as his power pulled the corruption into himself. But I couldn't leave the circle, couldn't abandon the ritual to fight this monstrosity, even though every instinct screamed at me to protect my pack from what Seline had unleashed. Then Seline herself stepped forward, and I saw something in her expression that chilled me to the bone. She wasn't horrified by what she'd created. She was fascinated by it, enthralled by the raw power she'd managed to force into existence. Beautiful, she whispered, her blue eyes wide with manic excitement. Look at what's possible when we stop limiting ourselves. Look at what we could all become. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Seline hadn't been redeemed. Her offer to help save my daughters hadn't been motivated by guilt or moral awakening. It had been another manipulation, another step in a plan I was only now beginning to understand. She didn't want to stop the prophecy anymore. She wanted to control it. wanted to be the one who determined how the Trinity's power was used, who they became, what they accomplished. And she was willing to turn her own father into a monster to achieve it. "You're insane," I breathed, splitting my attention between the ritual that was slowly saving my daughters and the growing threat of both creatures Seline had unleashed, her transformed father and her own twisted ambition. "I'm visionary," she corrected, her hands beginning to glow with that same corrupted silver light. "The old ways are dying, Sarah. Pack hierarchy, traditional leadership, the careful balance we've maintained for centuries, it's all crumbling. But your daughters could rebuild it all. Could create a new world where supernatural beings don't have to hide, don't have to limit themselves." "Under your guidance," I said, understanding flooding through me. "Under my influence," she agreed. "They're children. They need someone to shape them, to teach them how to use their power responsibly. Someone who understands the bigger picture." The creature that had been her father chose that moment to attack again, its massive claws reaching for Luna's still form. But this time I was ready. Supreme alpha power blazed from me in a focused beam of pure authority, not just commanding but fundamentally altering reality around the threat. The creature's claws stopped inches from my daughter's body, held in place by power that reached deeper than physical force. "You will not touch my children," I commanded, and my voice carried the weight of absolute law. "You will not threaten my pack. You will stop." The corrupted creature froze completely, its eyes wide with shock as it realized it had no choice but to obey. Supreme alpha authority wasn't just strong. It was undeniable to any supernatural being, no matter how powerful or twisted. But Seline was still human enough to resist, and her power was still growing. "Impressive," she said, circling the ritual circle like a predator stalking prey. "But you're splitting your focus, aren't Sarah? How long can you maintain that level of control, while also saving your daughters? How long before you have to choose between stopping me and completing the ritual?" She was right, and we both knew it. The ritual demanded everything Damon and I could give, required our complete attention and power to draw the poison from our daughters' systems. But I couldn't let her transform more people into monsters, couldn't let her corrupted vision of the future take root. Through the mate bond, I felt Damon's understanding and his desperate resolve. He was weakening rapidly as the ritual pulled his alpha power from him, as he took our daughter's poison into his own system. But he was also feeling my conflict, sensing the impossible choice I was being forced to make. "Trust me," his voice whispered through our connection. "Save the pack. I'll save our daughters." The faith in his mental voice, the absolute certainty that he could complete the ritual alone even if it killed him, nearly broke my heart. But as Celine's power flared brighter and more pack members began to back away in terror, I knew he was right. The Supreme Alpha's duty was to all supernatural beings, not just her own children. And sometimes protecting everyone meant making the hardest choice of all. I turned to face Seline fully, letting my Supreme Alpha power blaze unchecked for the first time in my life, and prepared to discover just how far I was willing to go to stop her twisted vision of the future.
Chapter 8. I felt the exact moment Damon's alpha power died. It rippled through the mate bond like a shockwave, not painful, but profoundly empty, like a song suddenly missing its melody. The man who had commanded armies, who had ruled through strength and ancestral authority, became simply Damon. Father, protector, the human man who loved his daughters enough to sacrifice everything he'd ever been to save them. The ritual circle blazed brighter as his sacrifice fed the ancient magic, silver light spiraling upward like a beacon that could be seen from heaven itself. I watched through my Supreme Alpha awareness as the poison was drawn from Luna, Stella, and Aurora's small bodies, pulled into Damon's system where his fading alpha power burned it away like purifying fire. He screamed. The agony of taking that much corruption into his body, of letting it consume the supernatural strength that was part of his very DNA, should have killed him instantly. But love made him stronger than biology, and he held on as the dark toxins ravaged his system, held on as his wolf form flickered and died, held on until every trace of poison had been cleansed from his daughters' bodies. When the light finally faded, three things became immediately clear. My daughters were breathing normally, their natural color returning as their trinity bond blazed stronger than ever before. Damon was alive, but forever changed, no longer the supernatural alpha he'd been born to be, but still the father our children needed him to be. And Seline was screaming in fury at seeing her carefully laid plans crumble to ash. No, she shrieked, her corrupted power flaring wildly as she realized the ritual had succeeded. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to guide them, shape them, control their destiny. The creature that had been her father roared an echo of her rage, but my supreme alpha command held it frozen, unable to move against my will. Still, I could feel the strain of maintaining that level of control while simultaneously managing the aftermath of the ritual. My daughters were stirring, their violet eyes opening with a clarity and purpose that made my heart swell with pride and terror in equal measure. They sat up in perfect synchronization, their small hands still touching, their combined power beginning to pulse with something far greater than healing. "Mommy?" Luna's voice carried that otherworldly authority again, but softer now, more controlled. "We can feel everything. Everyone." Stella nodded, her silver flames dancing around her fingers without burning. "All the scared people. All the angry people. All the broken connections between the packs." Aurora's reality-shifting abilities had stabilized, no longer chaotically pulling past and future into the present but showing glimpses of possibility with surgical precision. "We can fix it," she said simply. "We can heal what's been broken." Before I could respond, before I could warn them about the dangers of using their power so soon after nearly dying, they acted. The Trinity bond between them exploded outward, silver light racing through the cathedral and beyond, touching every supernatural being within a 100-mile radius. But this wasn't the overwhelming authority I wielded as Supreme Alpha, this was something gentler, more fundamental. It was healing on a level that transcended the physical. Through my enhanced awareness, I felt the change rippling outward like stones dropped in still water. Pack rivalries that had festered for generations simply stopped mattering. Ancient grudges between werewolf clans dissolved as my daughter's power reminded everyone what it felt like to belong to something larger than territorial disputes. The artificial barriers that had divided supernatural species for centuries began to crack and crumble. In the cathedral itself, I watched wolves from different packs. Some who had been enemies for decades, help each other to their feet. Elder Thorn was supporting a warrior who had come to kill the Trinity, both of them looking stunned by the sudden absence of hostility between them. "This is impossible," Elder Thorn whispered, his ancient eyes wide with wonder. "The divisions between packs, the hierarchy that's existed since the first Alpha, it's all changing." "Not changing," Luna corrected gently, her 4-year-old voice carrying wisdom that should have taken centuries to acquire. "Healing. This is what it was always supposed to feel like before people forgot that strength comes from unity, not dominance." The truth of her words resonated through every supernatural being present. We hadn't lost our individual identities, our pack loyalties, our cultural traditions, but the toxic competition, the endless power struggles, the fear-based hierarchies that had kept us divided were simply gone. Burned away by the Trinity's combined light like morning sun burning off fog. But Seline wasn't ready to accept defeat. "You think this changes anything?" she snarled, her corrupted power building to dangerous levels. "You think your pretty light show can erase centuries of natural order? I'll show you what real power looks like." She raised her hands, silver fire crackling between her fingers, but this wasn't the clean healing flame her father had once wielded. This was something dark and twisted, fed by her fury and desperation, designed to destroy rather than create. The attack she launched wasn't aimed at me or even at my daughters. It was aimed at the pack members who were still helping each other, still marveling at the sudden peace between former enemies. She was going to murder innocent people just to prove that unity was impossible, that her vision of controlled power was the only realistic future. I moved without thinking, my supreme alpha authority blazing as I intercepted her attack with my own power. The collision of energies sent shockwaves through the cathedral, cracking stone that had stood for centuries and sending everyone scrambling for cover. "Enough," I commanded, pouring absolute authority into the word. "You will stop. You will submit. You will." But Celine's corruption ran deeper than I'd realized. She'd been twisting supernatural power for so long that she'd become something beyond normal commands, something that could resist even supreme alpha authority through sheer malevolent will. "I will not be dismissed," she screamed, her attack intensifying. "I will not watch everything I've worked for be destroyed by children and their naive dreams of peace." The battle between us lit up the cathedral like a supernatural aurora, power clashing against power as I fought to protect my daughters and my pack from her corrupted fury. She was strong. Stronger than I'd anticipated, and her willingness to destroy everything around us made her dangerous beyond measure. But she'd made one critical mistake. She was fighting alone. Damon, despite his exhaustion and the loss of his alpha power, stepped up beside me. He couldn't contribute supernatural strength anymore, but he could offer something else: tactical knowledge, strategic thinking, the kind of leadership that didn't depend on otherworldly abilities. "Her father," he said quietly, his voice hoarse from the ritual. "She's drawing power from what she did to him. Break that connection, and she'll collapse." I followed his gaze to the creature that had been Elder Marcus, still frozen by my command but crackling with the same corrupted energy that fed Seline's attacks. The transformation she'd forced on him wasn't just punishment, it was a supernatural battery, feeding her power while slowly killing him. "Can you maintain the freeze?" I asked, not taking my eyes off Seline as she gathered energy for another devastating attack. "Not for long," I admitted. "But maybe long enough." I reached out with my supreme alpha authority, not trying to command the creature but to sever the connection between it and Seline. The process was like performing surgery with lightning, delicate work that required absolute precision while under attack. Seline realized what I was doing and doubled her efforts, her corrupted fire blazing brighter as she tried to kill me before I could cut off her power source. But my daughters chose that moment to act again. Not with overwhelming force or reality-altering power, but with something simpler and infinitely more devastating. They forgave her. The Trinity bond pulsed once, sending a wave of pure compassion towards Seline that hit her like a physical blow. It didn't try to force her to change, didn't attempt to overpower her corruption. It simply offered her the same healing they'd given everyone else. The choice of whether to accept it. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the real Seline beneath all the twisted ambition and corrupted power. The 19-year-old girl who'd been manipulated by Elder Marcus into believing she was saving the world. The woman who'd spent years living with choices that had slowly poisoned her soul. The person she might have been if fear and politics hadn't shaped her into something monstrous. She could have taken the healing. Could have let my daughter's power burn away the corruption and give her a chance at redemption. Instead, she chose to reject it with a fury that made her previous attacks look like gentle breezes. "I don't want your forgiveness," she screamed, her power exploding outward in all directions. "I don't want your healing. I want control. I want power. I want." Her words cut off abruptly as her own corrupted energy turned against her. The healing she'd rejected, the compassion she'd refused, created a feedback loop that magnified her darkness until it consumed itself. She collapsed to the cathedral floor, her power burning away like morning mist, leaving behind nothing but a broken woman in a torn wedding dress. The creature that had been her father collapsed at the same moment, the forced transformation finally failing as the connection between them severed. Elder Marcus returned to his human form, scarred and traumatized, but alive and mercifully unconscious. The cathedral fell silent except for the soft sound of my daughter's breathing and the distant echoes of the healing they'd sent rippling across the supernatural world. It was over. The immediate threat was ended, the poison cleansed, the Trinity saved. But as I looked around at the changed faces of my pack, as I felt the fundamental shift in supernatural society that my daughters had created, I realized this wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. "Mommy," Aurora said softly, tugging at my torn dress, "what happens now?" I knelt beside my daughters, gathering them into my arms as Damon moved to join us. His face was pale with exhaustion, marked by the permanent loss of his alpha power, but his eyes were clear and focused entirely on the family he'd almost lost. "Now," I said, looking out at the pack members who were still helping each other despite their differences, "we build something better. Over the following weeks, I established a new order. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through the same healing authority my daughters had demonstrated in the cathedral. The Supreme Alpha title wasn't meant to be a crown, it was meant to be a service, a responsibility to protect and guide rather than rule. I disbanded the rigid pack hierarchies that had kept supernatural beings divided for centuries, replacing them with councils where every voice could be heard. I opened communication between species that hadn't spoken peacefully in generations. I made it clear that power in this new world would be measured by how much you helped others, not how much you could dominate them. And through it all, Damon proved himself in ways that had nothing to do with supernatural strength. He didn't try to reclaim his position or demand recognition as my mate. Instead, he focused entirely on earning the right to be part of our daughters' lives. He learned their favorite bedtime stories, their individual quirks and preferences, their fears and dreams. He attended every school performance and doctor's appointment, helped with homework and nightmares, and slowly built the relationships he'd lost through his own mistakes. I didn't forgive him immediately. 5 years of pain and betrayal couldn't be erased by one grand gesture, no matter how noble. But I watched him prove through daily actions that he'd learned from his failures, that he valued being a father more than being an alpha, that he was committed to earning back the trust he'd destroyed. And gradually, carefully, I began to let him back into my heart. Not as the broken girl who'd been cast out in disgrace, but as the woman I'd become through surviving that exile. I'd needed those 5 years of struggle and growth, had needed to build my own strength and find my own identity before I could be truly equal partner to anyone. The journey from broken exile to Supreme Alpha hadn't been punishment, it had been preparation. Preparation to be strong enough to change the world my daughters would inherit, wise enough to guide them without controlling them, and confident enough to rebuild a relationship on my own terms. One evening, as we sat together watching Luna, Stella, and Aurora play in the garden behind our new home, a place that belonged to our growing family rather than any packed territory, Damon took my hand. "I know I don't deserve another chance," he said quietly. "I know I failed you in every way that mattered. But if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that I've learned from those mistakes." I studied his face, seeing not the arrogant alpha who'd once ruled through birthright, but the man who'd sacrificed everything for his daughters without hesitation. The man who'd spent months earning their trust without asking for recognition or reward. "I'm not the same person you cast out," I warned him. "I'm not going to be the submissive mate who defers to your judgment. I'm the Supreme Alpha now, and that comes with responsibilities you might not understand." "I know," he said simply. "And I'm not the same person who made those terrible choices. I'm not asking you to go back to what we were, I'm asking for the chance to build something new. Something better. Something worthy of the incredible woman you've become." Through the window, our daughter's laughter rang like silver bells, and I felt the future spreading out before us, not predetermined by prophecy, but shaped by choice. My choice. Our choice. The choice to forgive without forgetting, to rebuild without repeating past mistakes, to create a love story worthy of the new world we were building together. But even as hope began to bloom in my chest, a shadow fell across the garden. Seline stood at the edge of our property, no longer glowing with corrupted power but somehow more dangerous for her apparent helplessness. She looked broken, defeated, stripped of everything that had once made her formidable. When she spoke, her voice carried easily across the distance between us, though she made no move to come closer. "You think this is over," she called, her words meant for me alone. "You think your pretty new world order will last. But there are others, Sarah. Others who see what your daughters represent, what they could become. The vampire courts are already mobilizing. The Fae are whispering in their ancient councils. And things far older and darker than any of us have begun to stir." My blood turned to ice at her words, but I kept my expression calm as I moved to stand between her and my daughters. "This victory," Seline continued, her broken smile visible even at this distance, "is just the beginning. They're coming for the Trinity, Sarah. And next time, you won't be able to heal your way out of the darkness they'll bring." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the forest without another word, leaving behind only the echo of her warning and the terrible certainty that she was right. I watched my daughters playing in the garden, 3 little girls who'd already changed the world simply by existing, and felt the weight of the future settling on my shoulders like a mantle made of starlight and shadow. The trinity of the silver moon had risen. The supreme alpha had claimed her throne. The supernatural world had been healed of centuries of division and hatred. But this was only the first chapter of their story. And I would be ready for whatever came next. Epilogue, 5 years later. The sound of children's laughter drifted through the open windows of our kitchen as I stood at the counter, watching Damon attempt to flip pancakes while 3 9-year-old girls helped by adding increasingly creative ingredients to the batter. "Dad, chocolate chips don't go with blueberries," Stella informed him seriously, her silver flames dancing around her fingertips as she sorted berries with supernatural precision. "Says who?" Damon challenged, grinning as he caught a perfectly flipped pancake in the pan. 5 years of practice had made him surprisingly skilled at domestic tasks, though he still approached cooking with the same tactical intensity he'd once brought to pack warfare. "Says the laws of flavor harmony," Luna replied primly, consulting a cookbook that was floating beside her at eye level, held aloft by gentle silver light. "According to page 47, complementary fruit combinations require." "According to the trinity of breakfast," Aurora interrupted with a giggle, "everything tastes better when we make it together." And suddenly the kitchen was filled with that familiar silver glow as my daughters unconsciously combined their powers, Luna's ancient wisdom guiding the recipe, Stella's truth-revealing flames ensuring perfect cooking temperatures, and Aurora's reality-shifting creating the most delicious pancakes that had ever existed or ever would exist. "Girls," I said gently, not looking up from the newspaper I was pretending to read, "remember what we discussed about using power for everyday tasks?" "But Mom," Luna protested, "we're not using it for convenience. We're using it to show Dad how much we love his pancakes." My heart melted a little, the way it still did whenever I witnessed the easy affection between Damon and our daughters. It hadn't been immediate. Those first months after the cathedral had been careful and tentative, with boundaries and supervised visits and long conversations about trust and forgiveness. But gradually, naturally, they'd built something beautiful together. "In that case," I said, setting down my paper and moving to wrap my arms around Damon from behind, "I suppose breakfast magic is perfectly acceptable." He leaned back against me, solid and warm and wonderfully ordinary in his flannel shirt and jeans. No supernatural strength, no alpha authority, no political power, just a man who'd found his true calling as a father and was discovering that being human didn't make him any less extraordinary. "Good morning, Supreme Alpha," he murmured, tilting his head so I could press a kiss to his temple. "Ready for another day of ruling the supernatural world?" "Ready for another day of trying to keep our daughters from accidentally reshaping reality before their second cup of orange juice," I corrected, but I was smiling as I said it. The past 5 years had been a whirlwind of changes, both personal and global. The healing the Trinity had sent rippling across the supernatural world that day in the cathedral had fundamentally altered how our society functioned. Pack wars had ended not through conquest but through the simple recognition that we were all part of something larger. The rigid hierarchies that had kept werewolves, vampires, fae, and other supernatural beings separate had dissolved in favor of cooperative councils where every voice mattered. It hadn't been without challenges. Change never was. There had been holdouts who resented the new order, traditionalists who mourned the loss of the old ways, and yes, external threats exactly as Seline had warned. But each challenge had only made us stronger, more united, more committed to the world we were building together. And through it all, our daughters had remained simply children, extraordinary children with world-changing abilities, but children nonetheless who needed bedtime stories and help with homework and reminders to brush their teeth. "Speaking of reshaping reality," Damon said, nodding toward the window where we could see the rest of our rather unconventional extended family gathering for our traditional Sunday brunch. Elder Thorne was setting up tables in the garden with the help of several pack members who'd become more like family than followers over the years. Marcus, the younger Marcus, whose sacrifice had saved us all, was there too, scarred but alive and serving as my chief advisor in the new Supernatural Council. His father, Elder Marcus, worked quietly beside him, transformed by Luna's binding into someone who genuinely wanted to help rather than harm. Even Seline was there, sitting on a blanket under the oak tree with a group of children from various supernatural families. Her power was gone forever, burned away by her own corruption, but she'd found purpose in teaching the youngest members of our community about the old ways, not to perpetuate them, but to help everyone understand how we'd grown beyond them. It had taken 3 years before I'd been able to invite her to our home without feeling the urge to post armed guards. But forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't a destination, it was a practice, something you chose to do every day until it became as natural as breathing. "Aunt Seline," Aurora called, waving from the kitchen window. "Come help us with the pancakes. Dad's trying to make them too perfect, and Luna says perfect isn't the same as good." "Perfect is an illusion," Seline called back, but she was smiling as she said it, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in all the years I'd known her. "Good is what happens when you stop trying to control everything and start letting love guide your choices. See?" Aurora said triumphantly. "Aunt Seline understands." I caught Damon's eye and saw my own amazement reflected there. 5 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be standing in my kitchen with the man who'd once banished me, watching our daughters seek advice from the woman who'd tried to destroy us, I'd have questioned their sanity. But here we were, living proof that redemption was possible, that people could change, that love really was stronger than hatred. "Mom," Stella said suddenly, her flames guttering as concern crossed her young face, "someone's coming. Someone, different." I was instantly alert, my supreme alpha senses extending outward to scan for threats. But what I found wasn't danger, it was something far more unexpected. A delegation was approaching through the forest that bordered our property, moving with the careful formality of an official diplomatic mission. At their head walked a woman I recognized from council meetings, Lady Nightshade, one of the vampire court's most respected elders. Beside her strode a man whose pointed ears and otherworldly beauty marked him as high fae nobility. "Diplomatic visit," I murmured to Damon, who was already moving to position himself protectively near our daughters. Old habits died hard, even when there was no alpha strength to back them up. "On a Sunday morning?" he asked skeptically. "Supernatural politics don't observe human schedules," I replied, but I was already walking toward the front door. "Girls, why don't you help your father finish breakfast? I'll handle our unexpected guests." But Luna was already shaking her head, her violet eyes distant with the weight of ancient knowledge. "We need to go with you, Mom. This is about us." Stella nodded, her flames dancing with anticipation rather than fear. "They're bringing news. Big news." Aurora's reality-shifting abilities flickered around her like heat shimmer. "Good news," she said firmly. "I can see the celebration. Lots of celebration." Despite my instinctive desire to protect them from whatever political complications were approaching our door, I'd learned to trust my daughter's supernatural instincts. They'd been right about everything else, their power, their purpose, their ability to heal rather than harm. "Together then," I said, extending my hands to Luna and Stella while Aurora took her father's hand. "Whatever it is, we face it as a family." We walked out into the garden where Lady Nightshade and her companion were waiting with the kind of patient dignity that came from centuries of existence. The vampire elder bowed formally when she saw us, followed by her fae counterpart. "Supreme Alpha," Lady Nightshade said, her voice carrying the musical quality that marked her as one of the old bloodlines. "Forgive the intrusion, but we bring news that could not wait for official channels." "What kind of news?" I asked, though I kept my tone friendly. The past 5 years had taught me that most diplomatic crises could be avoided through open communication and mutual respect. The Fey nobleman stepped forward, his ageless features bright with something that looked remarkably like joy. "The kind of news that comes perhaps once in 1,000 years, he said. "Your daughter's healing has reached farther than any of us imagined possible." He gestured, and the air shimmered with Fey magic, showing us images that took my breath away. Supernatural communities across the globe, vampire covens in ancient European cities, werewolf packs in the American wilderness, fake courts in hidden valleys, and creatures I didn't even recognize. All living in harmony that would have been impossible just 5 years ago. The barriers between our worlds are dissolving, Lady Nightshade continued. Not through conquest or forced integration, but through genuine understanding and cooperation. The Trinity's gift has created a new age of peace that spans every supernatural species. That's wonderful, I said carefully, but I sense there's more to this visit than just sharing good news. The two delegates exchanged glances, and suddenly both of them were smiling with excitement that made them look centuries younger than they actually were. There is to be a formal celebration, the Fey Lord announced. A gathering of every supernatural community on Earth, brought together to honor the Trinity of the Silver Moon and officially recognize the new age they've created. A party. Aurora clapped her hands in delight. A really, really big party. The biggest party in supernatural history, Lady Nightshade confirmed, her ancient dignity cracking to reveal genuine warmth. Representatives from every species, every bloodline, every corner of our hidden world, all coming together to celebrate what your daughters have given us. Luna looked thoughtful. When? 6 months hence, at the autumn equinox, the Fey Lord replied. It will take that long to coordinate such a gathering, to ensure safe passage for species that have been enemies for millennia. Stella's flames danced brighter. Will there be music? And dancing? And cake? Mountains of cake, Lady Nightshade assured her solemnly. I have it on good authority that the werewolf packs are competing to create the most elaborate dessert displays, while the vampire covens are planning wine pairings that will be discussed for centuries. I felt Damon's hand find mine, his human strength steady and reassuring as we processed what we were being told. A global celebration of supernatural unity, centered around our 9-year-old daughters. The political implications alone were staggering. But as I looked at Luna, Stella, and Aurora, at their bright faces and excited chatter about cake and music, I realized that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that the world they were growing up in would be fundamentally different from the one I'd been born into. Better. Kinder. More connected. We'd be honored to attend, I said formally, then grinned at our guest's obvious relief. Though I should warn you, traveling with the Trinity requires extensive planning. They have opinions about everything from transportation to accommodations. We'll need our own rooms, Luna said seriously. Aurora talks in her sleep, and she sometimes accidentally shifts reality when she dreams. And we'll need advance notice of all the food ingredients, Stella added. My flames show the truth about everything, including whether something will give us stomachaches. And we'll need time to meet everyone, Aurora finished. I can see all the people who are going to become our friends, and there are so many of them. Lady Nightshade and the Fey Lord exchanged another look, but this one was filled with delight rather than concern. It will be our pleasure to accommodate any requests from the Trinity, the vampire elder said. You've given us a future we never dared dream was possible. The least we can do is ensure you have comfortable pillows and properly vetted snacks. As our guests departed with promises to send detailed plans and coordination schedules, I found myself standing in our garden surrounded by the sound of supernatural beings from different species and backgrounds laughing together, sharing food, and celebrating the simple joy of connection. Overwhelmed? Damon asked quietly, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Grateful, I corrected, leaning back against his chest as I watched our daughters explain the finer points of pancake making to Elder Thorne, who was listening with the same serious attention he'd once reserved for pack warfare strategy. 5 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And now? I turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd once broken my heart so completely I'd thought it would never heal, who'd spent 5 years proving through daily actions that people could change, that love could grow stronger in the broken places. Now I know that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what you're really meant to have, I said, rising on my toes to press a kiss to his lips. I love you, Damon Blackthorne. Not the alpha you used to be, but the man you chose to become. I love you too, Sarah Blackthorne, he replied, and my heart still skipped a beat when he used my married name. We'd had a quiet ceremony the year before, witnessed by our daughters and closest friends, with vows that spoke of second chances and choosing each other every day. Both the woman you always were and the supreme alpha you grew into. Group hug. Aurora called out, apparently having overheard our conversation with the supernatural hearing that all our daughters had inherited. Family group hug. Luna and Stella immediately abandoned their cooking lessons to race over and wrap their arms around us, their combined warmth and silver light creating a perfect bubble of belonging that encompassed our little family. I have a confession, Luna said solemnly as we held each other close. I used my ancient sight to peek at the celebration planning. Luna, I said in my best mom voice, though I was fighting a smile. We've talked about using your abilities to spy on people. It wasn't spying, she protested. It was advance reconnaissance. And Mom, it's going to be amazing. There are going to be creatures there we've never even heard of, music that hasn't been played for centuries, and food from every corner of the supernatural world. Will you dance with me at the party, Dad? Stella asked, looking up at Damon with shining eyes. I promise not to accidentally set anything on fire. I'd be honored to dance with the most beautiful truth-teller in the supernatural world, Damon replied seriously, and Stella beamed with pride. What about me? Aurora demanded. Will you dance with me too? I'll dance with all my girls, Damon promised. Though I should warn you, I've spent the last 5 years learning to cook and change diapers and braid hair. My dancing skills might be a little rusty. That's okay, Aurora said confidently. I can see the future where we're all dancing together, and it's perfect. Not because the dancing is perfect, but because we're together. As the afternoon sun streamed through the leaves of our oak tree, as the sound of our chosen family's laughter filled the air around us, as my daughter's silver light wrapped us all in warmth and belonging, I felt a deep sense of completion settle into my bones. This was what I'd been fighting for during those desperate early days of exile. Not revenge, not vindication, not even justice, though all of those had played their parts. I'd been fighting for this moment, this feeling, this future where my daughters could grow up surrounded by love and acceptance and the unshakable knowledge that they were valued for who they were, not what they could do for others. The Trinity of the Silver Moon would face other challenges as they grew older. The supernatural world they'd helped create would encounter new problems, new conflicts, new opportunities for growth and healing. But whatever came next, we would face it together. Not as the broken fragments of a family torn apart by politics and lies, but as something new and stronger and infinitely more resilient. We would face it as the Blackthorns, bound not by pack hierarchy or prophetic destiny, but by the simple, revolutionary power of choosing to love each other every single day. And if that wasn't magic worthy of changing the world, I didn't know what was. Come on, I said, kissing the top of each daughter's head before stepping back toward the house. Those pancakes aren't going to eat themselves, and we have a celebration to start planning. The best celebration in supernatural history, Luna declared. With the most perfect imperfect pancakes ever made, Stella added. And all our favorite people there to share it, Aurora finished. Hand in hand, we walked back toward our home, our real home, built on forgiveness and second chances and the daily choice to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. Ready to begin the next chapter of our extraordinary, perfectly ordinary life.